every block and district of the country, that person, to my mind, why would they not be like any other police officer? Why would they not also be susceptible to corruption? Because we are giving them even greater powers. We are giving them powers even of intercept of phones, of emails, of all things that we need to give, I think, at the top level. But at the lower levels where we don't have day-to-day scrutiny and the capacity to scrutinize, it's difficult. On the grievance redress side, what we are suggesting are these 5 things. Number one, that we have people, it made very clear through the use of Section 4 rather than the Citizens' Charter. We are saying use Section 4 of the RTI Act to say what are the obligations of a public authority. Because if you look at it, a Citizens' Charter may have only 3 things of a department. But if I find that office closed, then I have a grievance. There are hundreds of things that cause me grievances that will not be in that Citizens' Charter. Section 4 of the RTI Act says these are obligations of the public authority. They should be actually the basis for my grievances. That you have not followed your own obligations as you are supposed to be doing them, number one. Number two, we are saying that every department at a block level at least, maybe lower, but at least at a block level should have a public grievance redress officer. And if they do not sort out the grievance in 1 month, they should also be liable for penalties. Number 3, we are saying that there should be a people support center in every block in the country, computerized, with telephone, phone lines, with the capacity to be able to reduce a grievance in writing, issue a dated receipt, forward it to the right place, track it all the way, and automatically raise it to a level of an appeal with the district grievance redress authority, automatically have it move up. Number 4, we say that there should be district grievance redress commissions in every district of the country, which will have the duty to redress that grievance in 1 month and have the powers to penalize and compensate. And lastly, we believe that there should be state and national grievance redress commissions only as appellate bodies and as advisory bodies for policy, because grievances often come out of poor policy where they can advise for change in policy. So this is, in a nutshell, the content of what we are trying to suggest in this whole period of the debate. We put it forward in terms of debate. I think Aruna will talk a lot about process. This was primarily about content, and it's only the bare bones of it. A lot of it is contained in the clause and subclause. And as you know, and we know, and as the RTI experience has taught us, every little comma is important. Every little clause is important. Subclause is important. So the purpose of these kinds of discussions all over has been to involve as many people as possible in as many of the clauses, subclauses, and the formulations as possible, as well as the processes that I think finally, at the end of this winter session, I believe we will have a much stronger set of measures. What exactly they will be, I don't know. But I think all of us are going forward in that direction, and some of those directions perhaps are on
Distinguished friends, fellow activists, gives me a feeling of empowerment to be with all of you, to see old friends and new acquaintances, I'm sure, who will become friends. Because in the last 20 years of my life as an activist, concerned with democracy and with political empowerment, I have gone to various places, just increased the number of people with whom I feel a kinship, and despite differences very often, colleagues with whom there is a journey. So I greet you all, and I'll begin today talking a little bit about the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan. I know many of you know us very well. Nandini has been an old friend and fellow traveler. She knows all about us. She's been to visit us in the village. But this is occasioned by a few questions that have been put to us. So what do you know? You live in a city, you're an intellectual. I'm really happy to be called an intellectual. It's an appellation that comes rarely to me. So if you put me between and amongst intellectuals, they'll frown at me. They probably won't accept that I even have an intelligence, let alone an intellect. I only have a postgraduate degree and no PhD, and that disqualifies me from being an intellect in certain circles. But I do believe that the intellect, the determination, the intelligence, commitment, courage, ethics are all contained in the practical lives of our millions of poorer peasants and friends who live in Bharat. The Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan is located in a small hamlet in central Rajasthan. Nikhil and I and Shankar, who went there in '87, still live in that small hut which belongs to Shankar's cousin. Shankar's father was a talati, and not a very good one at that. He died when Shankar was very young. He was brought up by his widowed mother, and Shankar has done 17 odd jobs, sold namkeen. He's worked in a poultry farm. He worked as selling kerosene. So, except for Nikhil and I, the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan consists of people who are really workers and peasants. We live in this small mud hut. In Rajasthan, we build with stone and mud. We continue to live there. We all earn the minimum wage as salary because we feel that we fight for workers and peasants. They earn the minimum wage, this is the statutory minimum wage prescribed by the Rajasthan government, that we too should earn the same. And in a way, our lives have been shaped by our determination to live and work with poor people. My interest in political action therefore stems from a concern of Bharat. A Bharat that is continually at the receiving end, no matter what the changes are. We are on a national highway number 8. We see a lot of cargo going between Ahmedabad, Bombay and Delhi and further on wherever to Amritsar or to wherever it goes, Jammu. And we see the most modernized cargo crosses by on the high street, on the main highway. But we people continue to live more or less in the same conditionalities of people who lived in that village 200 years ago. Women suffer the same ills. We still have to cover our faces when we see elders. We still can't wear chappals in the middle of the chopal. So those who want to dismiss me as an intellectual who doesn't know India, I think has got their perspective wrong. But nevertheless, I could be wrong. I could be wrong in many ways, but not in the perspective from where I see the lives of very poor people getting empowered through any legislation or law so that they get their share as citizens of this country. I wanted to say this to you because much of what we say emanates from a feeling of belonging not only to you people but also to them. Nikhil and I have a blessing, I think it can be called a blessing, of being able to speak in English, of having had English education, of understanding middle class India, but never able to forget that large masses of people live on the other side with deprivations we cannot imagine, with a kind of frustrations impossible to define. It begins, a small story will define it very clearly to you. I remember that Sushila in 1996, after a 40-day dharna in Biawar, we went to Delhi to spell out, and a meeting organized by Nandini, Ajit Bhattacharya, Prabhas Joshi, in which many people had come, including Justice Sawant and some political leaders, including VP Singh and others. The press asked Sushila, who studied only up to class 4, she was in her regular Rajasthani dress, and they asked her, why the hell have you come? What do you know about right to information? She wasn't prepared to answer. She didn't get, she didn't make notes like I do and come back with the mind prepared that if the press asks me, this is what I'm going to say. And look at what she answered. She answered in Hindi, and I'll speak in Hindi, and I'm sure you understand it. This much Hindi everyone understands in India. She said, मैं अपने बेटे को 10 रुपये देकर बाजार भेजती हूँ और वो वापस आता है तो उससे मैं हिसाब लेती हूँ। ये सरकार मेरे नाम से अरबों खरबों रुपए खर्च करता है, मैं हिसाब नहीं लूंगी क्या? ये हमारा पैसा, इसलिए हमारा हिसाब. And that became the slogan of the Right to Information campaign, हमारा पैसा, हमारा हिसाब. So for common sense and for knowing whether I'm on the right track or not, I often, in fact most of the time, go back to people like Sushila, who have their feet firmly on the ground and to understand that every day is a struggle, that every minute is a struggle to live. Not really to live in a better way, but even to survive, because it means better medicines, it means a school or no school, it means a life or no life sometimes. So on the cutting edge of India are these people, and they are the people for whom I think I would like primarily to work and think of. But these are the people who gave us the right to information, because when they saw the conditionality of their own lives, they thought of others. And I think most important by being with them has been the importance of collective wisdom and thinking, and also the need always to think of the other. That's why no matter what my opinion is, whether it differs or not from other people, I'll never damn another person's thought process. I think everybody has a right to think, and everybody has a right to differ. Living with them and loving them. I have so many differences with them. I don't agree on the caste issue with them. I don't agree about their social mores sometimes with them, but I have to sit and battle with them. They are very dismissive of me, and they say, you go. You can do what you like in your own home, but in our environment we have now no choice. We'll have to do it. We agree it's a bad thing, but it will change. So they have taught me my essential politics of tolerance, of democratic action, of understanding the conditionality of other people, and I owe them a lot. They've also taught me essentially the role of democratic debates. In my village, and therefore in the area in which I work, which is about 500, 600,000 villages in Rajasthan, in that area, but now because of the way we work and because of RTI and NGNREGA, we work all over the state. So we have all kinds, and I have worked in Rajasthan for over 30 years. So I have women friends spotted and dotted all over the place. I have political enemies all over the place. We are all at war. We know we don't agree, but still we have to engage with each other. I've learned to engage with the local political leaders because you can't wish them away. They are there. So we have to engage with local political leaders. We simply don't agree with them. We disagree with them. We've also learned parliamentary language. We have understood you can't hurt another person. And the basis of it all, we live in a Gandhian manner, because we do believe to live simply and without access to too many things strengthens our struggle and our battle, because at no point of time can anyone threaten us that they'll take something away from us. To give an example, last year for 47 days, the Suchna Rozgar Abhiyan sat on a dharna in Jaipur, asking for minimum wages for people who work on NREGA work sites. In those 47 days, we collected 5.5 lakh rupees, which is what we spent. We ate roti and dal, and we wrote roti and sabzi and whatever. And people donated vegetables, they donated dal, whatever it is. But no matter what, we live, and our political action is also very, very low cost. For somewhere we find the ethics of all our battles against corruption are also determined by how much money we spend on each action, and we are very critical of each other. In fact, we do something spending a little more than we have to answer. Inner accountability and democracy within the Suchna Rozgar Abhiyan, which is a campaign of which the MKSS is a part, fighting for rights in Rajasthan. But I also understand that lawmaking has two sides to it. Legislation. Who defines the principles of a legislation? Who defines the approach of a legislation? Who makes the legislation? Who formulates the legislation? The interesting thing in this campaign was the larger political education and understanding that dawned on all of us. Me, Sushila, Norati, Chunni Singh, Nikhil, Shankar, and Kavita, and Nandini, who also joined us, and then Ajit Bhattacharya and Prabhas Joshi, the whole lot of us, when we started making the law. I remember Prabhasji, great, wonderful speaker, Prabhas Joshi. Great mind, simple in his language, but very, very sharp in his perception. I remember he told us a story. He said, does everyone understand Hindi?
No, sorry, I don't.
Okay. Only one person? Okay, then I'll speak in English. But the Hindi, in Hindi it's much stronger. So may I say it in Hindi and then translate it into English?
That will be better.
He said, that is as Prabhas ji, he said, मैं इंदौर का रहने वाला हूँ. वहाँ पे उज्जैन एक गांव, एक शहर पड़ता है इंदौर के पास. वहाँ पे एक पुराना कहानी है कि एक गंवार था शेपर्ड। तो वो जाता था तो उसको बिल्कुल बेवकूफ मानते थे सब लोग, मगर जब भी वो जानवर लेके जाता और एक टापू के ऊपर बैठता तो बहुत बुद्धिमत्ता की बातें करता, बहुत समझदारी की बातें करता। तो लोगों ने सोचा ये कैसे हुआ। all the people who are above 50 will know the story. तो फिर उन्होंने उस पहाड़ को खोदा तो नीचे से विक्रमादित्य का सिंहासन निकला। तो लोगों ने कहा इसलिए उसकी बुद्धि है क्योंकि वो विक्रमादित्य के सिंहासन के ऊपर बैठ के बात किया, तो वो इतना भी गवाड़ हो उसकी बुद्धि सही हो गई। Then he said, प्रभाष, दिल्ली में भी ऐसा ही एक टापू है, उसको राइजीना हिल कहते हैं। उसके ऊपर बना हुआ है राष्ट्रपति भवन और 2 सचिवालय, नॉर्थ ब्लॉक और साउथ ब्लॉक, और वहां जो बैठता है वो एक ही बात बोलता है। अब उसको खोद के नीचे देखेंगे तो क्या निकला? वेलेस्ली का सिंहासन। तो हमारा तो युद्ध जो है उस वेलेस्ली के सिंहासन के साथ है। The mindset that rules all our rulers, no matter which political party they may belong to. The story goes that this young man went, and he was a bit of a foolish boy. He used to go and sit on a little hill, and when he sat on the hill, he spoke beautifully. So when they dug the hill, they found the throne of Vikramaditya. That's how his mind was. He spoke learned things. So Prabhashji said in Delhi also there is a hill, which is called Resina Hill. And whoever sits on that Resina Hill says the same thing. So if you dig that Resina Hill, what comes out? And what is on top of Resina Hill? Rashtrapati Bhavan, the south block and the north block. So if you dig deep down under Resina Hill, he said you will find Wellesley's crown. So throne. So no matter who sits in that place has the same mindset. So this mindset is there from the Talati to the Rashtrapati. So in a sense, if we want to work with longevity and common sense and understand that people have to be dealt with, not eliminated, then common people teach you how. They fight against their brother-in-law, they have to fight against kinship, they have to fight against their brethren. They don't have the luxury we have of fighting a political battle there and coming home to roost. They fight a political battle is against their kith, their kin, their jati, their sub-jati, their rishtedar, whatever you call it, and it comes home. Everyone who went into the Right to Information campaign from the MKSS who was locally born had to face social ostracization from their families. Many of them were thrown out of their communities. For many months they could not attend social functions because the corrupt man they opposed was related to them, was in the same community or caste. So the battles they fight are very realistic battles. So they keep me under control. So what is the principles they define? So the principles they define, but we have to listen to them and we have to understand that all idiom is not the same. Idiom differs. Not only do thoughts differ, but idiom differs. They will not speak in the language I want them to speak. They will say very intelligent things, but they'll say it in the language they know. Illiteracy is not ignorance. Illiteracy is not having a skill. Wisdom is a universal right of all of us. Intelligence is a universal right of all of us. Literacy is an important skill, but we make too much of it. So, in this whole battle, they taught us, Prabhashji, Ajitji, Kuldeepji, all would say, take it back once there and talk to those people and come back and tell us ki theek hai ki nahi. Whatever we formulate, the positions we formulate, because we need to know whether it's practical, whether it's tenable. So there was a dialectic between the struggle and advocacy. So when Justice Sawant sat to draw up the first draft of the law in 1996, he did it with a team of experts. We didn't write the law, we didn't draft the law, but we were the keepers of what the law should contain. We read it periodically, we critiqued it. That's how the first Right to Information law was born. We realized that law, however good it may have been because Justice Sawant made it, was critiqued time and again. There was a H.D. Shori committee that was set up that changed it. It went to Tamil Nadu 1996, they passed it, a very bad law. Goa did a very good job. The second state to pass the law was Goa. And journalists in Goa took up the campaign and passed the law. Then Maharashtra, then Rajasthan, then Madhya Pradesh, then Delhi, then Assam. Many states passed the law before the law actually was passed in 2005 by the Parliament in Delhi, setting aside the National Freedom of Information Act, which was not notified, and the Right to Information law was passed, after the standing committee made more than 150 amendments to the law after listening to testimonies. That's why we argue all the time that the standing committee is an important part of parliament. It is not the ruling party. It is not the ruling government. The standing committee is composed of a section of parliament representing all political parties in parliament. So when you go to the standing committee, you have people from the opposition, you have people from each political party in parliament. And if there is no standing committee, the law that comes out is definitely weaker because it doesn't give you time for testifying and debating. That's why our position has been very strong that no matter what the law, it must go to a standing committee. The SEZ Act did not go to a standing committee, and that's why we feel we've been cheated. Because the law would have not gone the way it was through the standing committee. We now have a new polity post the Right to Information law. And what is it? It's a new polity which brings us new challenges. Because the Right to Information law has made all political leaders of all of us. It has also made government servants of all of us. Please do not forget this. We now look at papers like a Babu would. I remember I left the IAS in 1975, fed up with Babudam. And in 1996-97, I used to hold my head in my hands and tell Shankar and Nikhil, I'll become a Babu again. Reams of papers, you're going through reams of file notings, you're looking at everything, the subclause of this and that, and you're spending hours and hours on papers because that's how you'll get to the truth. So we've become now, participatory governance has made us all into people interested in the act of governance, which means we're interested both in the political aspect of governance and in the actual act of making rules, regulations, bylaws, implementing them and confronting the bureaucracy at every stage. Please remember that no matter what revolution we have in the political system, the bureaucrats will be there. They stay for 35 years, 36 years, they will stay. And if the permanent government decides to block you, you've had it. Because the permanent government can ruin every single new idea. That we've all known. And some of us know from inside, some of us know from outside. So a new kind of political engagement with democratic mores has come to be. And if we don't understand it, and if we duck people who have this political engagement as people who are co-opted, there's something wrong with us. Engagement is necessary for monitoring. By just passing a very radical law and then leaving it to them, we are ruined. So if there is political engagement from the village to New Delhi, it is now, for many of us, like me, an onerous burden. Something we don't relish very much. But I cannot now say, for instance, that I will not go to New Delhi. I have to go to New Delhi to engage with issues in which, by being there and engaging with them, with many others, I can make a difference. Whether it is getting bail for Binayak Sen, or whether it is looking at Salva Jurum and the way it's functioning in the Chhattisgarh, whether it's the enactment of the NREGA and how it is being done in Jharkhand or Tamil Nadu or anywhere else, or if it is any other law that is being implemented wrongly, or if it's the UID which is being introduced and its problems, or anything else. We all have now got roles when we have opinions, when we have understanding to interact with, oppose the government when necessary, confront it when necessary, and enter into dialogue or debate when necessary. And when they say to